One afternoon, a great and famous psychologist named Julio Cesar was seen walking in a hurry to his office on the 21st floor. After he reached the office, he suddenly went out of the window because he wanted to jump and end his life. Because of this, his personal assistant panicked. Not long after that, the police arrived at the scene. Seeing the dire situation, the police immediately asked another psychologist for help to persuade Julio to stop, but that psychologist gave up. He felt that an amateur like himself could not possibly persuade such a famous person who was on a different level like Julio. He feared that he might actually be influenced by the situation and jump as well. At the same time, a homeless man everyone called Mestre saw what happened from below and felt sorry for Julio, so he walked into the building, went up to the top floor, and sat down next to Julio. Julio was very surprised and asked who the man was, and although he tried to chase the man away, the man simply refused to leave. He said that he still wanted to hang out there and told Julio that if he wanted to jump, he should just do it. Fortunately, because of those words, Julio started to feel unsure about what he was about to do. Many people and reporters gathered down below to watch. In that moment, Mestre told Julio that if he really intended to jump from the start, he should be confident about it. He then asked why he was hesitating and encouraged him to jump. This made Julio feel emotional. He told him that he knew nothing about his life or his pain and stated that he only wanted to die. Upon hearing that, Mestre instead moved closer and said that people who do such things do not actually want to die, but only want to run away from the problems they created themselves. Immediately, Julio became silent because those words hit him hard, and after thinking about it, he finally realized the truth and decided not to jump. When they went down, everyone welcomed both of them. No one expected that a homeless man could win a psychological battle against a famous psychologist. In that moment, while the reporters gathered, Mestre looked panicked as if he did not want anyone to recognize his identity, so he hurried away, but Julio followed him because he still wanted to talk. That night, at the place where the homeless stayed, Julio asked if he could stay there too. He wanted to learn much more about life. Fortunately, Mestre allowed him to stay. In the morning, Mestre invited Julio and a friend named Bartolomeu to go to a church to look for breakfast. When they entered the building, they found that a funeral ceremony was taking place. In that moment, after seeing the grieving expressions on everyone's faces, Mestre asked why they were so sad. He questioned why they only focused on the moment the deceased person died, because if they focused on when the person was still alive, there would surely be many beautiful memories. Upon hearing this, the wife and children of the deceased began to tell their wonderful stories, and thanks to that, the atmosphere that was once filled with sorrow slowly started to turn into happiness. Julio was amazed by what he saw. Then, before they left, Mestre looked at the face of the deceased while smiling, as if the two of them had once been very close friends. While they were on the street, Julio asked who the homeless man really was because, as a professional psychologist, he could tell that the man in front of him was not an ordinary person. However, with a relaxed tone, Mestre answered that instead of being busy trying to know other people, it was better to know oneself. Julio felt confused about the meaning of those words. In the middle of their walk, they saw a boy being chased by the police, so they decided to go after the boy too. Then, in an empty building, Mestre managed to catch the boy, and not long after that, the police, Julio, Bartolomeu, and an old woman arrived. It turned out that the boy had stolen the woman's bag, and the police ordered them to hand the boy over. Because he felt pity, Mestre instead pleaded with the woman to let the boy go, explaining that he was just a poor and hungry child. Fortunately, the woman's heart softened, and she forgave him. She even gave him some money. After the police and the woman left, the boy treated them to a meal using the money he had just received as a way to say thank you. His name was Dimas, and he had been forced to steal because he lived all alone. Because Mestre felt sorry for him, he then invited Dimas to travel along with the three of them. In the afternoon, while they were on the street, a car suddenly chased them and intentionally tried to hit them. Fortunately, they managed to escape. Mestre then said that the car was actually chasing him, but he could not explain the situation at that moment. After they calmed down, the four of them continued their journey, and soon they arrived at a nursing home. When they entered, Mestre told everyone that his friends wanted to sing. Julio, who could not sing, felt confused because he was being forced to do it, but eventually he agreed. While his friends performed to entertain the elderly people, Mestre went to the balcony to meet a woman with Alzheimer's who was sitting alone in a wheelchair. Although she remained silent, he continued to tell her stories about his day. It seemed as if the two of them had been very close friends in the past. After he finished talking and went back inside, an old man took over the singing because Julio's voice was quite bad. In that moment, Julio thanked Mestre. Because of him, he was able to become close with the people there. Upon hearing that, Mestre smiled and said that the saddest thing in the world is not death, but being ignored. He then explained that if he had not sung, Julio would have felt sad being ignored in that place since he knew nobody there. That night, The four of them enjoyed the view of the city. In that moment, Mestre asked what the reason was for Giulio wanting to jump from the building the day before. He also asked if he had a family. With tears in his eyes, Giulio then shared his story. He said that he was not a good father. For many years, he had been successful in building a career as a famous psychologist at an office full of pride, but at home, he was a failure. He failed as a father because his way of teaching was too harsh. In his eyes, his son was always wrong, and no matter how many achievements his son had, he continued to think they were not enough. He was too arrogant to offer a single compliment, and because of that, his son suffered from severe depression. It was an irony that although he succeeded in healing many people on the outside, he realized that he had actually hurt his own son inside his home. Upon hearing his story, Mestre seemed to understand his position. A few days later, at the office of a large media company, the leaders held a meeting to discuss a homeless man who had gone viral. This man was often invited to give motivational speeches at gatherings for wealthy people, where he provided incredible advice about life. The words that came from his mouth touched the hearts of many and helped them realize the truth. Because he was so popular, people nicknamed him the Dream Seller or the Great Inspirer. Many people on social media became his followers, and whenever he appeared on television, the ratings for the show would increase drastically. However, despite everyone seeming happy, throughout the entire meeting, a leader named Roger looked very anxious. One night, Mestre held a seminar in a cemetery that was attended by many wealthy business people. Everyone was confused about why he chose a graveyard for the event, so he explained that he knew people like them wanted advice on how to be excited about life and how to find more money to become rich. Unfortunately, he stated that he would never give that kind of advice. Instead, he asked what they were actually chasing. He questioned why they continued to think that work was everything while forgetting the things that truly mattered. He told them that the most valuable thing, which can never be bought with anything, is time spent with the people they love. After hearing those words, everyone became silent and started to think deeply. After the event ended and the people left, Mestre approached a single grave, and it was a grave with the name Mellon Lincoln written on the headstone. Later, while Mestre, Giulio, Bartolomeu, and Dimas were on their way home, a car suddenly appeared and began shooting at them before speeding away. Unfortunately, during the sudden attack, Dimas was shot, so they hurried to take him to the hospital. At the hospital, Mestre informed the others that Dimas was in critical condition. He then spoke to Giulio and told him to go home and stop following him. He warned him that if he stayed nearby, his fate might end up the same as Dimas's. He explained that the life lessons from him were over and that it was time for him to return to his family. In the end, after spending a long time sleeping outside and following Mestre, Giulio finally returned to his house that night. However, as soon as he entered, his wife immediately told him to leave. She told him that after their son heard the news about his father wanting to jump from a building, he became even more depressed and ran away from home. Because of this, he had not returned yet. Giulio felt more guilty than ever because he had no sense of purpose, so he eventually went back to the place where the homeless stayed. Then, while he was sleeping, a woman woke him up. She then introduced herself as a staff member from a television station who wanted his help to tell Mestre about an invitation to appear on a motivational show. So, the next afternoon, Julio met with Mestre and passed on the invitation. However, Mestre immediately refused the offer, but Julio continued to persuade him. He begged him to grant the request just this once, arguing that if his advice were broadcast on television, many people would find enlightenment. He wanted others to find a purpose in life just as he had. Upon hearing his words, although he was still unsure, Mestre finally decided to agree. The next day, Mestre, Julio, and Bartolomeo went to the television station. When they met Roger, Mestre greeted him warmly as if they had known each other for a long time. Not long after that, the show began. However, after the host introduced the guest star, Roger suddenly played recorded videos of Mestre's dark past from the operator room while wearing a cunning smile. It was revealed that a few years ago, Mestre had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital and was even diagnosed with schizophrenia. This meant that all of his words to the public during this time were considered nonsense and the result of hallucinations. From a distance, Giulio was shocked. He never expected that the person he respected so much was considered a madman. At the same time, the host continued to corner Mestre with insulting words while he just stood there in silence. Then, in the middle of that quiet moment, when Mestre was about to leave, one person in the audience asked him not to leave because she still believed in him. At that moment, Mestre finally started to tell the story of his real life. He then introduced himself by his original name, Mellon Lincoln, the famous man that everyone thought was dead. He revealed that he was still alive. He was once a super wealthy businessman whose name was featured in Forbes magazine as the third richest person in the world and owned a giant business with 200 large companies. One of those companies was the very television station where they were sitting. In the past, all the bright lights of the city were focused on him. However, one day his assistant reported that the company was having internal problems, and to save the company's money, his trusted advisor, who was none other than Roger, suggested that he should fire a large number of employees. Without any suspicion, Mellon followed the advice. However, before he signed the papers, his close friend and coworker warned him that a massive layoff would not just cut off the employee's income, but would also make thousands of families suffer. Unfortunately, Mellon did not care about that, and because he was offended that his decision was being questioned, he cruelly fired his friend too. As time went on, it turned out that his friend was right. The problems became even more complicated when Roger, whom Mellon trusted deeply, was caught being a traitor. He was involved in corruption and was working with other leaders to get rid of him. Upon realizing that, Mellon told his assistant to find a lawyer so he could fight back. On that same day, his daughter was performing at a school event. At that moment, both his daughter and his wife felt sad because Mellon had promised to be there, but he broke his promise. It turned out that this had happened many times. He had already missed many of his family moments because he was always busy with work. In the afternoon, after the school performance ended, Mellon invited his wife and daughter to travel on a private jet provided by the office as an apology for not coming to his daughter's performance. However, just as they were about to leave, his phone suddenly rang because of another work matter. Because of that, Mellon told them to go without him, and so his wife and daughter were forced to leave without him. But when the jet took off, it suddenly exploded. It turned out that there was a bomb planted to get rid of Mellon, but it had instead taken the lives of the two people he loved most in the world. Mellon was in total shock. In the middle of the plane's wreckage, he cried uncontrollably. He was willing to trade all of his success if only his two loved ones could live again. Unfortunately, his regret was useless because it was already too late. Since that incident, his life was destroyed. Then, although he was not insane, Roger put him into a psychiatric hospital because of his depression and told the public that Mellon had died so that he could take over the position at the company and steal all of his wealth. To make matters worse, the secretary who had served Mellon for a long time was also pushed aside and now lived in a nursing home while suffering from Alzheimer's. At the same time, Mellon's close friend, whom he had fired before, had passed away. For many years, Mellon tried to recover so he could take back what belonged to him, but he eventually realized that returning would not change anything because all that wealth could never bring his family back. Now, all Mellon wanted was peace. He no longer cared about any of his wealth. Because of this, he chose to live as a homeless man and started sharing his life experiences with the public so they would not feel the same regret as him. He told the audience that they could laugh or think his story was just a hallucination, but that was his true life story. Fortunately, after hearing his words, the audience felt very moved and gave him a loud round of applause. Everyone began to think deeply about the meaning of their own lives. After the show ended, Giulio thanked Mellon for all the lessons he had provided. Now, he knew exactly what he had to do as a father, and he could not wait to see his son and apologize to him. However, on his way home, Giulio saw a news report on television about a young man who wanted to jump from the office building where he worked, so he hurried to the location. Soon, when he arrived, he found that the young man was actually his son, and he was about to do exactly what his father had done before. Julio went to him and tried to persuade him to stop, but his son refused. Unlike him, who had felt unsure about jumping, his son actually looked completely ready to jump. At that moment, Giulio finally said the words his son had always hoped to hear. He said he was sorry for every mistake he had ever made, and he begged for a chance to fix everything. He even stated that if his son still wanted to jump, then he would jump together with him. After hearing those words, his son began to cry and immediately hugged Giulio tightly. Meanwhile, from below the building, Mellon saw their happiness and felt happy too.